it's just more of a picture that is emerging, that there may well have been contacts between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein's regime. There are others, and we will be laying out the case.
Again, I want to separate out 9/11 from the other relationships between Iraq and the al-Qaeda organization. But there is a pattern of relationships going back many years.
One of the things we learned from September 11th was that the intent of the terrorists and those who would supply them with weapons of mass destruction is very, very clear. They're to wipe out our way of life.
The problem here is that there will always be some uncertainty about how quickly he can acquire a nuclear weapon. But we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
Our generation has now heard history's call, and we will answer it. America has entered a great struggle that tests our strength and even more our resolve. Our nation is patient and steadfast. We continue to pursue the terrorists in cities and camps and caves across the earth. We are joined by a great coalition of nations to rid the world of terror. And we will not allow any terrorist or tyrant to threaten civilization with weapons of mass murder. The conduct of the Iraqi regime is a threat to the authority of the United Nations and a threat to peace. Iraq has answered a decade of UN demands with a decade of defiance. If the Iraqi regime wishes peace, it will immediately and unconditionally forswear, disclose, and remove or destroy all weapons of mass destruction. If Iraq's regime defies us again, the world must move deliberately, decisively to hold Iraq to account. But the purposes of the United States should not be doubted. The Security Council resolutions will be enforced. The just demands of peace and security will be met, or action will be unavoidable.
Mr. President, are you going to send Congress the proposed resolution today?
I am.
Are you asking for a blank check, sir?
I am sending a suggested language for a resolution. I've asked for Congress's support to enable the administration to keep the peace. And we look forward to a good, constructive debate in Congress. I appreciate the fact that the leadership recognizes we've got to move before the elections, and look forward to working with them.
Okay, thank you all.
How important is it that that resolution give you an authorization to use force?
That'll be part of the resolution, the authorization to use force. If you want to keep the peace, you've got to have the authorization to use force. I didn't hear it. But there's no. Let me guess. The United States is guilty. The world doesn't understand. We don't have any weapons of mass destruction. It's the same old song and dance that we've heard for 11 long years. And the United Nations Security Council must show backbone, must step up and hold this regime to account. Otherwise, the United States and some of our friends will do so.
Mr. President, do you believe that Saddam Hussein is a bigger threat to the United States than al-Qaeda?
That is a interesting question. I'm trying to think of something humorous to say, but I can't when I think about al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein. They're both risks. They're both dangerous. The difference, of course, is that al-Qaeda likes to hijack governments. Saddam Hussein is a dictator of a government. Al-Qaeda hides, Saddam doesn't. But the danger is that they work in concert. The danger is that al-Qaeda becomes an extension of Saddam's madness and his hatred and his capacity to extend weapons of mass destruction around the world. Both of them need to be dealt with. The war on terror is, you can't distinguish between al-Qaeda and Saddam when you talk about the war on terror.
Secretary Rumsfeld in Europe today, when asked if there was evidence tying Iraq to al-Qaeda, said yes. He did not elaborate
Are you prepared to elaborate?
Several of the detainees, in particular some high-ranking detainees, have said that Iraq provided some training to al-Qaeda in chemical weapons development. So yes, there are contacts between Iraq and al-Qaeda. We know that Saddam Hussein has a long history with terrorism in general, and there are some al-Qaeda personnel who found refuge in Baghdad. No one is trying to make an argument at this point that Saddam Hussein somehow had operational control of what happened on September 11th. So we don't want to push this too far. But this is a story that is unfolding, and it is getting clearer, and we're learning more.
If an inspection team goes in now and finds nothing because perhaps Iraq is very good at hiding it, or perhaps they have nothing, but you all are of the belief that they have it. If they find nothing, does it make your job more difficult in trying to assemble an international coalition?
Goodness gracious, that is kind of like looking down the road for every conceivable pothole you can find and then driving into it. I don't get up in the morning and ask myself that. We know they have weapons of mass destruction. We know they have active programs. There isn't any debate about it. So the idea that if you had an appropriate inspection regime, that they'd come back and say you were wrong is so far beyond anyone's imagination that it's not something I think about.
We've just concluded a really good meeting with members of the United States Congress to discuss our national security and discuss how best to keep the peace. We are moving toward a strong resolution, and all of us and many others in Congress are united in our determination to confront an urgent threat to America. According to the British government, the Iraqi regime could launch a biological or chemical attack in as little as 45 minutes after the order were given.
Is the U.S. in any way exaggerating or misleading the American public in regard to the potential threat posed by Iraq?
Is the U.S. government, you mean the senior members of the administration? Not to my knowledge. And if I knew of an instance, I would certainly correct it.
Saddam Hussein is a homicidal dictator who is addicted to weapons of mass destruction. We agree that the Iraqi dictator must not be permitted to threaten America and the world with horrible poisons and diseases and gases and atomic weapons. We've also discovered through intelligence that Iraq has a growing fleet of manned and unmanned aerial vehicles that could be used to disperse chemical or biological weapons across broad areas. We're concerned that Iraq is exploring ways of using these UAVs for missions targeting the United States. Saddam Hussein has held numerous meetings with Iraqi nuclear scientists, a group he calls his nuclear mujahideen, his nuclear holy warriors. If the Iraqi regime is able to produce, buy, or steal an amount of highly enriched uranium a little larger than a single softball, it could have a nuclear weapon in less than a year. Facing clear evidence of peril, we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud. The dictator of Iraq is a student of Stalin, using murder as a tool of terror and control within his own cabinet, within his own army, and even within his own family. On Saddam Hussein's orders, opponents have been decapitated. Wives and mothers of political opponents have been systematically raped as a method of intimidation. And political prisoners have been forced to watch their own children being tortured. Failure to act would embolden other tyrants, allow terrorists access to new weapons and new resources, and make blackmail a permanent feature of world events. Later this week, the United States Congress will vote on this matter. I have asked Congress to authorize the use of America's military, if it proves necessary, to enforce UN Security Council demands.